When it comes to your personal journey of healing and growth, no matter the method you use, the vital point is to practice. If you're ready to transform your life and live with clarity, purpose, and connection, then you're in the right place. Welcome back to The Vital Point. I'm your host, Jonathan Schecter. I'm a breathwork facilitator and integration coach focusing on spiritual growth and emergence and helping you to stay grounded in your nervous system during work in expanded states of consciousness. The goal of the show is to inspire you to take action for yourself, whether you're taking the first step on your journey of healing and self-discovery or you're already a seasoned traveler. The truth is you have the capacity to evolve and transform and bring your intentions and dreams into the world. And there's never been more access to so many incredible modalities that can help you on your journey. This podcast will help you learn simple methods you can use to change your life with guided practices and interviews with practitioners who are doing the work. I want you to feel confident and inspired to take the next step on your own pathway to integration and wholeness because the answer is found in the action. That's the vital point. So let's take a deep breath and drop in. So if you've been following along this season, you know that I've been cleaning out the archives of podcasts that I haven't had a chance to post. And this is one of the last episodes in that list. This is an interview I had last year with Lama Mike Crowley. He's a Buddhist Lama and the author of two really amazing books, The Secret Drugs of Buddhism and Psychedelic Buddhism. And I wanted to talk to Lama Mike because I really enjoyed both of his books, and I really felt like the intersection of psychedelics and Buddhism was very relevant to this show. If you've been listening for a while, you know that we've featured many Buddhist teachers and meditation teachers as well. And I know you're in store for a really interesting interview with Lama Mike. As I went back and listened to this episode, I really feel like it's divided into two parts. The first part is really more about the material in Lama Mike's first book, The Secret Drugs of Buddhism. And the second part is more the Psychedelic Buddhism, his latest book. And the first half of the interview is very Buddhist centric as far as the topics and some of the terminology that we're talking about. So in case you're not as familiar with this, I wanted just to give you some context. Lama Mike and I discuss the psychedelic drugs that were used traditionally, according to the research that Lama Mike found in his book, during the tantric empowerments and tantric path that is kind of unique to Tibetan Buddhism. Now, as I mentioned in the interview, I've never come across actually taking psychedelics in these Tibetan Buddhist rituals, but according to Lama Mike's research, this was the original way that these empowerments and rituals were done. We also talk about what is called the kirtans or terma tradition within Tibetan Buddhism. Now, these were revealed treasures, teachings that were hidden in secret by Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, the yogi who brought Buddhism to Tibet and established the Buddhist tradition, merging it in some ways with the indigenous shamanic religion that was there before called Bon. So one of the unique things about Tibetan Buddhism is that it blends this shamanic Bon tradition with the teachings of the Buddha Dharma. And the termas are very unique in that Padmasambhava hid these treasures to be revealed at a later time by a specific practitioner. And so some of these termas are actual objects. The revealer would have a dream or a vision of Padmasambhava and be told where to find this teaching. And it might be in a rock, it might be hidden somewhere. Sometimes the teachings were revealed in the dreams or visions themselves. This is known as a mind treasure. So there are many of these revealed teachings, termas, and Lama Mike talks about one of them in the interview. So that's just a little bit of information on that. It's might seem strange if you've never heard of it before, but within the tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, it is very widely accepted and not that strange at all. And, more recently, as I was learning about the gene keys, which many of you may be familiar with, the creator of the gene keys also tells a story about receiving downloads of the gene keys from some other sort of realm or consciousness that he was connected to. So you might call this the Akashic records. Certainly, he compares it to the Tibetan terma sort of lineage and tradition. I invite you just to open your mind and listen with curiosity. And then the second part of the interview really goes into more about meditation and how we can apply meditation when we are working with psychedelics and also just in general to help with enriching our life and our inner work. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Lama Mike Crowley. It's truly a fascinating conversation and one that I was really curious and excited to actually have a chance to sit down and do. Before we get into the interview itself, I hope you've had a chance to go over and join the community on School at www.school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. It's really where I'm centering my work at this point. There are live breathwork and meditations there. In fact, in the beginning of April, I'm starting a 30-day course on meditation and microdosing called The Path of Meditation. That's going to be live every day during the month of April and open to all members. There's also a bunch of recorded breathwork and meditations there. Some of those are open to the entire community. Some of them are open to paid members. And the paid membership is very affordable, only $45 a month. And you get access to more than 7 live calls, plus all the recordings, all the material, courses. There's a whole lot of stuff there. But anyone can join, it's free. There's a community message board. You can connect and participate with other practitioners, ask questions, get access to workshops, and so much more. So I hope that you check that out. We have a free breathwork session coming up on March 20th. So if you're listening to this as it is airing the first week, you can join this free breathwork session by joining the community at school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy. Another new feature that we're having there is called the guest portal, where I bring in guest facilitators to lead practices that are complementary to the main core practices that we do of breathwork, meditation, and somatics. The first one is coming up on March 19th with Jonathan Quest Brown, who you may remember has been a guest on the podcast, and he's going to be leading a yoga session. And so, just like we've done with the podcast and having guests lead practices for you, we're going to be doing that within the school community as well. So if you are listening to this, you can join that live on March 19th, and paid members can get access to the replays as well. So I'm really going to continue to pour content and value into that community to support your spiritual emergence and your personal development and growth. So I hope you join us there.
I'm so pleased to be here today with Lama Mike Crowley. He's the author of The Secret Drugs of Buddhism and more recently, Psychedelic Buddhism. And I was just thrilled to reach out to him and actually get in contact about doing a podcast. So, Lama Mike, welcome to the Vital Point podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah. So perhaps we could just start with, a little bit of your background as far as your journey into studying both Buddhism and psychedelics and how those paths converged for you, and maybe just explaining what the title of Lama means for those that may be unfamiliar.
Well, Lama is the Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit word guru. It is not a monk, as people often assume. Yeah, I have never been a monk. And In fact, lay lamas wear different costume to the monks. Monks wear Tibetan monks anyway wear maroon, kind of like this. But when I'm togged up in my lama clothes, I wear white, a white skirt, white vest, and a white shawl, rather like if you've ever heard of Milarepa and his students. They were all rapers who wore this white cotton outfit in the high Himalayas and managed to stay comfortable by generating heat by a process called tumo in Tibetan, which is a long, complicated process, but it's one that is made available to people after they've had a certain amount of progress in the path, not something which is introduced at first. My background is I met a Tibetan Lama in London in 1966. His name was Chojam Trungpa Rinpoche, and he had a much greater effect when he moved to America. And at the same time, he decided that he wasn't going to use the traditional sacred drugs of Tibetan Buddhism, which go with the higher practices. He told my subsequent Lama this, and it seems that he instead used alcohol, which was a very dangerous thing for him to do as he became an alcoholic. But he was a wonderful teacher. My own history is a long and varied one. I'm 75 years old now, but I first took psychedelics 60 years ago when I was 15, and I met a Lama a couple of years later. Actually, after I'd been studying with the Lama for a while, after 3 years, he gave me refuge. That is, you accept the Lama, the Buddha, the Dharma, and that is the Buddha's teachings, and the Sangha, the community of Buddhists, as my refuge. And that was in a ceremony conducted at his place. Now, shortly after this, I had an LSD experience. I'd taken LSD several times before, but I took it afterwards and had an astonishing vision. With eyes closed, I was listening to Bach on the hi-fi, and I saw with my eyes closed an infinite array of crystal spheres. Every sphere was reflecting and refracting every other sphere. And this seemingly represented the entire universe, but from a radically different point of view. And I was very much impressed by this vision and stayed with it for about half an hour. And it left a lasting impression on me. And it was not until about a year later that I read an account by a Chinese mystic of exactly the same thing. And he founded a school of Buddhism based on this. Now, I don't know that he didn't take a psychedelic of whatever was available to him. And I also, um, I have no idea whether he had any other influence on him, but it seemed to tie in with my experience so well that I assumed that either psychedelics were a way into this experience that hadn't occurred to anyone else, or that it was a long known route to the same experience. But in either case, I decided to keep up both practices, both Buddhism and taking psychedelics. Some years later, my Lama, Lama Radhachimi Rinpoche, asked me, some people have told me that you take psychedelics. Is this true? And I said, yes. And he said, good. And then changed the subject. So that was the only word I've ever had from him on the subject of psychedelics. Yeah, so what more would you like to know?
Yeah, no, it's such an interesting intersection for me. I've considered myself a Buddhist for a little over 20 years, and also maybe not that whole time worked with psychedelics, but have gone through different sort of seasons where psychedelics have played a big part. And um, for me, there's always been a lot of overlap, or at least Buddhism has helped me have a framework for understanding some of the experiences that I've, you know, had in the psychedelic space. Um, but it's always been curious for me because it does seem like there's a lot of overlap, or that Buddhism has a lot to offer people that are exploring and working with
Well,
psychedelics.
I would agree with you to a certain extent. I just know that when I was first studying with Choden Trungpa Rinpoche, he was living at first in a squat, that is, living in a house which had been abandoned by its owners, with a bunch of hippies, and this was in Notting Hill in London. And at this time, this was about 1966, I think, and LSD was still legal in Britain. And he would tell people, basically middle-aged matrons at the Buddhist Society, that you should really take some LSD. And at the same time, he was telling some of the hippies that he lived with that they didn't take their LSD seriously enough. And he also told them that there was a Tibetan drug called Dutsi Rilbu, which was more powerful than LSD. All I can say is he should perhaps have tried a little more LSD, because that's about as powerful as you could possibly imagine. I met somebody a few years ago who had actually um, accidentally drank a whole bottle of Dutsi, of Amrita. The the Buddhist psychedelic. This was in a Tibetan center, and he was an alcoholic at the time, and he just smelled the alcohol in it and downed it, hoping to get drunk. Instead, he stayed high, tripping for 5 days, and had various visions of deities and dakinis and so on. Well, this is just one example of the Tibetan use of psychedelics. I know that there are other teachers who have used psychedelics and do use psychedelics with their students. They can be very useful. I usually insist that any students of mine begin without using anything at all and learn meditation. Just the basic shamatha and vipassana meditation techniques, so that when they enter the tantric path later, they are prepared for the use of such substances.
Oh, I want to come back to the meditation because I think that's an important sort of topic, especially for this audience. But just to give a little bit more context, you mentioned the Amrita, which is used in the tantric empowerment or initiation rituals within Tibetan Buddhism, and that's one of the major subjects of your first book of The Secret Drugs of Buddhism.
Right. It's also used in the monthly gatherings following the initiation. Well, either monthly or twice monthly, depending on which kind of initiation. And these are called Ghana chakras. And the Amrita is also given at the Ghana chakra. This was what the guy drank.
Okay. Yeah, and I found the Secret Drugs of Buddhism really fascinating because I guess even from having gone through several of these initiation empowerment ceremonies, the impression that I was under was that it was mainly symbolic, that I wasn't actually ingesting, like, say, a psychotropic substance.
Usually is. It usually is these days in the West, which I think is appalling. I think they should actually give people the real thing or not do it at all.
Right. So yeah, so that was I think my first curiosity with your work was here was something where everything that I had been exposed to previously, or at least I believed was symbolic, and it was part of these symbolic parts of the ritual and visualizations that I was being asked to or encouraged to to visualize as part of the initiation. But here, you've presented this whole book full of research and evidence that this was an actual psychedelic substance that was being used traditionally within the context of Tibetan Buddhism.
I think it's more common in the terma traditions. That is, the traditions of the discovered texts, which are often discovered by laymen. And it is actually a traditional prerequisite that the laymen have a wife or mistress. At least they have some sexual practices. And thus, all the monks and nuns of Tibet are excluded from becoming tertons or treasure discoverers.
Right.
And it was in the the context of a terton, that the guy I spoke of who drank the bottle of Amrita, he found that Amrita.
Wow. And I mean, I think that the whole Turton lineage is fairly psychedelic or mystical in and of itself, right? When we're talking about, Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, sort of, you could say, uploading these different teachings into into a space outside of time,
Right.
until it's ready for the practitioner or the students to download that teaching itself, and that there are physical objects that these teachings sometimes are written on, that are found by the Turton. That in and of itself is a fairly wild idea for some people in the West to sort of wrap their head around, right?
Oh, by the way, I have discovered one of those texts. There is a vast collection of these terma texts. Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche, the original Jamgon Kongtrul in the early 19th century, collected every terma that he knew about, and it's still a secret. You can't read the text, but you can read the table of contents that is permitted. And every single terma, it has the who wrote it, who discovered it, and other details which are in the table of contents. Well, one of them is supposed to have been discovered by a Bhutanese terton called Pema Lingpa. And he'd got all parts of this terma except one. And he wrote his own initiation for this one particular terma. And it was the only one in the entire collection that he wrote himself. And it just so happens that I seem to have discovered that terma, that one that he composed his own empowerment for. It was in a Bhutanese prayer wheel, which I found in an antique sale in London. But I still haven't presented it to anyone to check it out, because until fairly recently, just a couple of years ago, I thought it was a well-known terma. It turns out not to be well-known, and is probably this one that Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche replaced with his own writing.
What was that discovery process like?
The discovery? My ex-wife is an antiques dealer, and I helped her set up a stall in this antique fair. And once I'd set it up, I went around the fair looking for Tibetan items, and I often found a few. Now, I'm not very fond of prayer wheels, as I think it's a lazy practice of just spinning this prayer wheel instead of doing meditation. But this one happened to be a rather beautiful and old-looking prayer wheel, so I picked it up to check it out, and it just seemed too light. It should have 100,000 mantras inside it, which takes a lot of paper and it takes a fair deal of weight. So I took the lid off and looked inside, and there were just a few, well, 8 actually, pages of handwritten text. And I, as the guy who was selling it said, "Oh, I didn't know it did that." And I said to him, "How much?" And he said, 35 quid, governor. So I bought it for £35 and ran off home to examine the text, and was quite surprised to find it was a terma text. Has its own, all termas have their own punctuation. It's a specific kind of punctuation. And every page began with a cryptic symbol, which looked to me as if it was made up of all the syllables of the Tibetan mantra Om Ah Hung. But if you took parts of the Om, parts of the Ah, and parts of the Hung and put it together, that's the symbol you get. So anyway, I still have it, and I've since discovered that it's not known, and it's possibly this one that Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche replaced with his own writing.
I'm trying to imagine somebody, in the audience, listening or watching this conversation, to and just sort of putting myself in their place, that maybe this might seem like a fairly far out idea to wrap their heads around, whereas you and I are I think very grounded in, just, oh yes, of course, this is, it's not something that's unfamiliar to either of us. Myself, yourself obviously much more in depth and with more experience. But what it's bringing up for me, or what it reminds me of, especially in the context of this combination of psychedelics and Buddhism, is that psychedelics give us sometimes this glimpse into the fact that reality and the world around us is so much bigger than we're perceiving at any one time, just under normal circumstances.
That's absolutely true, of course.
Yeah, and definitely, like, I feel like that's been a common experience within the psychedelic space, is widening that keyhole, so to speak, that we're looking through, and maybe even being able to open the door rather than looking through the keyhole temporarily, before things start to kind of collapse back down into, what we would consider reality. So wow, what an amazing experience, and thank you so much for sharing it. So before we talk about meditation a little bit, I'm just curious about Chogyam Trungpa's sort of what you shared. And I wasn't, I guess it had slipped my mind that you studied with him, but it's a wonderful coincidence. We've had David Nickturn on the podcast, who's another student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, and so it's just a wonderful sort of synchronicity and connection in that way. But what do you think that taking LSD more seriously, what does that mean to you?
Well, it means like sitting down and just experiencing it without listening to records, without dancing, without doing whatever peripheral things these guys were doing. He meant that you just had to like listen to what the LSD was telling you. And these guys were apparently behaving quite frivolously. Some people he told that they shouldn't take LSD, that it was not good for them. But, I saw him tell middle-aged ladies that they should try it. And this was, of course, when LSD was still legal.
It's a great story. Okay, so let's circle back to meditation. So if for somebody listening to this that maybe is has heard about working with psychedelics as far as transformation or overcoming something they're struggling with, how does meditation fit into that process, and how can it assist in that type of transformation?
Well, I would say it's not so much transformation as revealing what you are fundamentally. Meditation and LSD, other psychedelics too. It's not just that one. Help you to discover what's really you, and you will. They should allow you to go within and discover the part of you which is already enlightened and already um, fully aware of um, the enlightened space.
Yeah, what's coming up for me is the Tibetan word for meditation literally means to become familiar,
Right,
right?
gom.
Gom.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, it is
Yeah.
familiarizing yourself with what is real and discarding uh, those things which are not real, like hatred, love in the common use of the word, um, and even apathy. So these are the three um, things which drive the wheel of existence: attraction, uh, hatred, and apathy. Um, if you can disengage from all of these emotions and just become aware of your surroundings and yourself, that is as much as psychedelics can do for you. But it's you don't actually need psychedelics, but it's like if I wanted to go to New York, I could either take a plane or I could walk there, and it's psychedelics are like taking the plane. Meditation is more like walking there. But if without meditation, um, you could fly to Tokyo by mistake. It's meditation puts you on the right path and
Yeah.
allows you to see um, the the ultimate goal eventually. Psychedelics can show you the ultimate goal, but it's only going to be for a few hours. So you better hope that that you get something really worthwhile and helpful from the psychedelics. Um, it's quite possible that people get frightened by psychedelics, and this is why it's always best, I think, to study meditation first, so that um, you're armed against these tremendous distractions. Psychedelics turns up the volume on everything, and so if you're distracted in meditation, you're going to be doubly distracted when you take psychedelics. So, best to uh, become familiar with the meditation process first, and then when you're familiar with how to to still the mind, how to look into the mind. These are shamatha and vipassana, respectively. Then you can take psychedelics, and then you can make full use of them.
I love the analogy of the, the plane and the walking, because even if you were to get on a plane and get either to New York or close to it, you would still need to walk when you get there, right?
Absolutely.
To get off the plane. um, for me, I've found that one of the most useful sort of skills, you could say, that has developed from my meditation practice is being able to let go of a particular thought or emotion, rather than being so attached to it, especially when it's a pleasant emotion
Uh,
or a thought. Like we all want to get away from the things that we have labeled negative, but it's a little bit more tricky when we're having a really pleasant experience. But like you said, in the psychedelic experience, the intensity of your thoughts and your inner world is so amplified and so much more intense that ability to let go and come back to a center, or back to your breath, back to whatever it is that you're with, has been so transformational.
right,
So it's really feel like it's taken me a lot further than just sort of going wherever the plane is is going, because I'm definitely not the pilot, right?
right, right. um, yes, and those who are really, really good at meditation can take other people on the plane with them, and this is especially if they've done psychedelics too. You can actually guide people on their psychedelic experience, um, even if it's initially distressful for them. You can put them at ease, mostly by simply meditating and being calm. They It's somehow contagious. It's it's um it's possible uh, to bring other people along with you, and even if they haven't studied meditation, they they will appreciate your own ability in meditation when they sit down with you and do psychedelics. It's something I've noticed, at any rate.
Yeah, I've noticed that myself. I mean, I see it sometimes in the work that I'm doing, just as a breathwork facilitator, and I do teach mindfulness at a treatment center, like a residential treatment
Mhm.
center. And sometimes people will say something like, "Well, I find your voice soothing," or just like when you come into the room, I feel a little bit calmer. I don't know why. And that's always a nice thing to hear. I don't really know what I'm doing it's not that I'm doing something intentional outside of maybe my, when I go to work, I try to, uh, sort of parrot the bodhisattva
Mhm.
ideal. I don't, I wouldn't call myself a bodhisattva, but at least I can try my best to live up to those standards and that way of living, right? Um, but definitely in the psychedelic space, I've had a couple of experiences where I noticed that, where, and it's funny you mentioned the prayer wheel, because that was the first time that I experienced that. Was I remember there was a mushroom experience I was having, and it was myself and my girlfriend, and um, things were a little bit chaotic in the space, just I could feel it. And I started spinning this prayer wheel, and I felt like I could feel the energy in the room changing in a more tangible way than I had in the past. Like the visualization aspect was sort of becoming more tangible, or more okay, I think I am understanding this in a different way. And I've had similar experiences in ayahuasca ceremonies where I feel like this is what they're doing when they're singing the Icaros, or doing these different healings, is they're affecting the energy in the room,
Right.
in this way that we're not usually able to detect.
Right. Well, one of my students is an ayahuasca page. He is Brazilian, and so rather than curandero, they call it a page. And I was interested in what you said about the bodhisattva. It reminded me of what Trungpa said. He said there are 8 or 10, depending on which scripture you read, qualities of a bodhisattva. And he said you'll never get to be a bodhisattva by practicing these qualities. He said, but once you are a bodhisattva, these things come naturally. They are manifestations of your bodhisattvahood. It's but bodhisattvahood is not something that you can create by perfecting these qualities. They just come naturally when you are a bodhisattva.
When there's this very distinct memory that I have, and this was fairly early on in my relationship with my current partner, and we were meditating in my apartment, and we got done, and she said, you should think about teaching meditation. And I said, to who? And I was being completely serious in that moment. And she said, you do realize that like most people don't meditate regularly, and that's a little bit unusual. And I said, okay, I can accept that. And she said, so there's something that you have to offer or to teach. And I was trying to explain to her that it's really hard for me to accept that, because the lineages that I've been studying in, and the teachers that I've been studying in, the people that, for instance, you mentioned the Tumo earlier in the conversation, right? This heat yoga that literally can heat up the whole room.
Oh, really? Yes,
through
absolutely.
Their practice, and do these other things that are miraculous, under sort of what we think of as reality. And in their miraculousness and their wisdom and their realization, will sit there straight to your face and say, I don't really understand anything. I'm just an old monk, and I have nothing to offer you. And even somebody like the Dalai Lama will say something like that, right? Like, well, I'm just a simple monk. I don't really have anything special to offer. So what I was trying to explain to her was, in the context of learning and feeling like I hope to be a student of these type of people, what do I possibly have to offer as far as meditation, or quote unquote realization, right? Like what could I teach somebody about the Dharma, when the people that I'm studying from and looking up to have this humility and this sort of facade of, I don't know anything.
Yes. You just reminded me of my current teacher back in the 60s, about 1967, I think it was. He had just come to Great Britain, and he was still very innocent as far as Westerners were concerned. And he was asked by an Australian woman at the Buddhist Society in London she said to him, "Oh, you're a Tibetan Lama. You must know a tremendous amount about Tibetan Buddhism." And he instinctively said, "Oh, I know very little." And she said, "Well, you're no bloody good then." And stormed off. He thought this was hilarious and told people about this in future. After that, he was quite proud of being labeled no bloody good by this Australian lady.
Yeah, the teachers that came out of Tibet, from that last generation that we, sort of have had access to, they're to me they're so amazing because they are so learned, they have so much education, and yet, like my teacher will say, out of all the things I've ever seen him teach on, he'll just say, well, just read the 37 Bodhisattva practices. Right. That's all you need to do. Like it's not, you have to go out and get a whole stack of books or memorize, a million different things. Just read these 37 verses. Like that's all you need to do. Right. And at the same time, I've watched him teach on one single line from like a Milarepa song for hours. Yep. It's like you can read this thing and think, okay, I sort of understand it. And then you sit with these teachers and they're like going into hours of depth that you didn't have,
right,
sort of access to.
Yes.
Like, wow, like it's so mind blowing. I remember that there was a particular, it might have been a Jamgon Control, writing, but it's something, and it's very poetic the way that he says it. And he says something like, I don't really have any realization. I'm just like a parrot that can repeat back what he's heard. And that has always stuck with me of like, okay, well, I'm not going to pretend like I have any sort of realization, but sometimes I can repeat back these things that I've read and studied myself.
Well, I assume that the 33 verses that you were referring to was the Bodhisattva Avatara by Shantideva. I don't know if you know the story of Shantideva, how he came to write this and give that teaching on bodhisattvahood. It seemed that he was the laziest monk in his monastery and that he was always sleeping. And this may have been because he was performing the dream yoga. We don't know, we can only assume. And anyway, he was given an ultimatum: either you give a talk on whatever subject you like, but you're going to give a talk to the whole monastery, or you're out. You're on your own. And the next week, he was about to give his talk, and everyone thought that he was, just a lazy bum. And he gave this brilliant, superb, and well thought out talk with no word in it which was in excess and unnecessary, and blew everybody away. It's just that very essence of having a profound knowledge of the subject without showing it. And
Right.
the Tibetan Buddhism is actually full of examples of this, of people who have been, or even I've heard of even hunters who made their living by killing animals have had the most profound realizations. And we would usually just dismiss them because they broke the very first, most fundamental vow not to kill.
Right. Yeah. It's always been something, maybe not always, but in the last few years, something I've really um, enjoyed or found some solace in. And I think the first time I read it was from a book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, where he's talking about, you know, the my lineage is the lineage of misfits, and like Talopo was a pimp, and like all these different, not what you think of when you think of realized Buddhist masters.
Absolutely.
and
That's my
and so,
lineage
like,
too. You
yes.
don't realize. Yes.
Right. So it's like, it's always it's made me laugh a little bit, and also um feel like I can relax into being myself, and just being authentic. That that there are many different paths that one can practice. You don't have to become a monk, or and even further to that, I mean, and I'm sure you could concur with your travels and your experience, but I had the privilege of living in Tibet for about a year, and some of the monks that I met um, were the least religious or spiritual people that I met. They were like kids that wanted to go buy a new phone, or like uh, talk to girls, or sort of have a normal life. And maybe you know I think some Western people, and myself included, at one point, when we encounter the Buddha Dharma, we mistake the accoutrement, the trappings, the symbols for the actual meaning itself. Just because I put on robes doesn't make me any more spiritual or any more realized. Just if I wear a mala, if I wear prayer beads and have statues in my house, it doesn't mean that I'm any better of a practitioner, just because I have those things.
Yes, that's very well said.
Yeah, and to me, that's what it comes. Why intention is so important, right? And this is something that I'm often explaining. So I'd love to maybe hear if you think I'm off the mark, or your own sort of take on it. Is there's lots of different mindfulness meditation. It's become quite prevalent in our society, right? So the way I've understood it is, if what makes this quote unquote Buddhist comes down to my intention. And I can put that intention into anything that I'm doing, whether it's something like washing the dishes, or having a conversation with somebody, or working with psychedelics.
Yes, I think that's true. And I think you're pretty much on the mark there.
One of the things that I really enjoyed in your newer book, Psychedelic Buddhism, is that there's a section about how psychedelics can help Buddhists, and how Buddhism can help with people working with psychedelics. Um, so, like, kind of in summary, what would you say are some of the things that Buddhism has to offer for somebody that is working with psychedelics?
Well, it has various techniques for shutting down the mind in its more trivial, mundane form. That if I asked the average man in the street to sit and not think, he would be absolutely lost. He wouldn't be able to stop thinking. But we have techniques that allow you to turn off that constantly flowing stream of thoughts. And we also have ways of examining the mind. That the quieting the mind is in the realm of shamatha, of tranquility meditation. Examining the mind is more the realm of vipassana, which is insight meditation. And these are immensely helpful tools.
Absolutely. What's one way that somebody can start to practice that insight meditation?
Well, first, I would say you should learn how to still the mind, to stop thinking. And it's not necessary that you stop every thought. There is a practice of stopping all thoughts, but for the most part, it's more relaxed, and we see a thought and we say, that's such and such a thought. That's a thought about paying the rent. That's a thought about going to work. That's a thought about my girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. And the trick is you see it, but you don't follow it. You don't say, oh, I should pay my rent, because if I pay my rent, I won't have the landlord breathing down my neck, and then I won't get angry because the landlord's after me, and so on. You don't follow it to successive thoughts. You just say, oh, that's such and such a thought, and leave it alone. And then you can go back to your practice, which may be breathing. The awareness of breathing is the simplest thing. If we're not breathing, we're not living. So we always have to breathe. So that's something which is always with us, and we can always focus on it.
I recently read something that is like, I never thought about it before, but when it rang out so true to me, and I'm like, oh, this is such good stuff, that another reason that br- focusing on the breath is so powerful is that we can't focus on the breath that we had a minute ago, and we can't focus on the breath that we're going to have in a minute from now. We can only focus on the current breath.
Yes, absolutely.
I thought, wow, like, how come I've never thought about that before? Well, Lama Mike, this has been a really wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing your time and wisdom. Just to, in a way to close, the name of the show is The Vital Point, and I actually took that from a Dzogchen teaching, the 3 statements that strike the vital point by Garib Dorje. So if you were to share a vital point for yourself right now, maybe something about your work or just something that feels alive in this moment as a vital point, what would that be?
Don't think about the past. It's gone. It can't be retrieved. Don't think about the future. It hasn't happened yet. And don't think about the present, because you're not getting one.
Thank you for sharing that. That was what I saw, that you had posted that, and it inspired me to, oh yeah, I got to remember to reach back out to you. So I'm glad that I did, and what a wonderful conversation. So thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. It's been a pleasant chat.
What a great interview. Thank you to Lama Mike Crowley for his time and patience with getting this episode posted. You can find Lama Mike's books, The Secret Drugs of Buddhism and Psychedelic Buddhism, on Amazon or wherever you purchase books, and definitely would recommend checking those out. If you're enjoying the show, I'd be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment and leave us a review. It's a simple, cost-free way to show support and help more like-minded people discover the show. While you're at it, make sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss any of the new episodes that are coming out. Also, make sure you're signed up for my newsletter at bluemagicalchemy.com to be the first to get updates, exclusive content, and insights delivered straight to your inbox. It's a great way to stay connected and keep your spiritual journey going. And when you sign up, you'll also get a free guide to using breathwork for integration as a way to show my gratitude for your support. Remember to go to school.com/Blue Magic Alchemy and join the community there for free. There's so much content. And if you're into breathwork and meditation, you're really going to love the recorded practices that are there. Remember, it's not about the method that you choose or the pace at which you travel. The vital point is to consistently show up for yourself and practice. As the saying goes, it's not the destination, but the journey that truly matters. Please don't hesitate to reach out, to connect, and share your journey, the successes and challenges alike. I'm just an email, DM, or review away. Let's journey, grow, and transform together. Thanks again for tuning in. Until the next episode, keep exploring, keep growing, and above all, keep practicing because that's the vital point.